Hello, good evening. Welcome to the June 17th meeting of Somerville Historic Preservation Commission. It is 6:54 p.m. June 17th, 2025. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And bear with me one moment. I need to get my agenda back here. Pardon me. Okay. Pursuant to the Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, this meeting of the Somerville Historic Preservation Commission will be conducted via remote participation. The video recording of these proceedings will be available on the city's website, meetings and events page, or by emailing historic@somerville.gov. And as is our custom, we do our little introductions. So if I'll just call you off, Ms. Price.
Hi, my name is Denise Price, and I live in a local historic district.
Mr. Bauer.
I'm Dick Bauer. I'm an attorney and was trained as a city planner. I live in Spring Hill.
Thank you. Mr. Shagnon.
I'm DJ Shagnon. I'm the landscape architect on the commission and a resident of Ward 5.
Thanks. I'm Eric Parks, resident of Ward 3, architect, historic homeowner. And we have several members of staff here. Ms. White.
Yes, I am Sarah White. I am a senior planner with the city. I am in the Planning, Preservation, and Zoning Division, PPZ, and I work in both historic preservation and in zoning.
Thanks. We have Ms. Anthony.
Hi, I'm Madison Anthony. I'm a planner with PPZ.
And we have Ms. Payne here.
Hi, I'm Lexi Payne. I'm also a planner with PPZ.
Cool. Welcome all. Okay, if I can bring my agenda back. We have one public hearing tonight on our agenda, and then we have some other business. So we'll just start off with that case. It's HP 25-000013. Address is 294 Lowell Street. The applicant is Adam Dash and Associates. Adam Dash. The owner is, forgive me if I mispronounce your name, it's Yang-Ching Shu. And the applicant seeks to demolish a building constructed a minimum of 75 years ago. Is the applicant here tonight?
We are here, Mr. Chair. Attorney Adam Dash, 48 Grove Street, Somerville, representing 294 Lowell Street LLC. Fernando Silva from 294 Lowell Street LLC should also be here if he could be promoted if he's here. So we're here for the demolition review. Yeah, I see him in the attendees if we could promote him. And Munir El Hood is also part of that team. We're here for a demo review hearing for the significance regarding the house at 294 Lowell Street. The 5-bay garage at the property was already found not significant in March. The house is currently a 2-family on a very large lot, especially when the 5-bay garage will be demolished. If you take a look at the staff report, I don't know if you have it in front of you, but page 2 has a really nice little map there. If you take a look at that, and you'll see across the street there's a very large building and a large parking lot. That's a circa 1979 apartment building and parking lot over at 301 Lowell Street. That is in the UR zone across the street there, and it has 32 units. And if you go up the street at the corner of Lowell and Wilton, there's this building with a red roof at 302 Lowell Street on page 2 of the staff report. It's the one that's not called out. It's the one after 298. That one at 302 is a 4-family and is a very different building type on the block as well. So what the applicant's seeking to do is demolish the existing structure at 294 Lowell to create badly needed housing near Magoon Square and the Green Line station. As stated in the staff report, the structure is a very common building type in the city. It's not a particularly good version of that very common building type. It sits on an almost completely paved lot. It's also seen a lot of alterations which have changed its form and massing, particularly if you take a look at the pictures on page 3, starting on page 3 of the staff report, particularly the lower left one, the left elevation. You can really see those large dormers that create pretty much a 3rd floor almost on the property. massively changing the massing and zoning there. You can also, if you look at the pictures, there's a rear addition, there's a small left side addition. There are metal posts on the front and second floor porch over the top of them. There's a change on the second floor window to a door to use the porch. Windows have been closed on the right and the rear sides. It's vinyl siding and trim, and the windows have been replaced. And there's been parge over all of the foundation there, and there's concrete front steps. So the structure, I would note that the structure is not associated with any historical persons or events. As amusing as the staff report stories about the Undertaker are, they didn't happen at this site. And if you notice, and his office wasn't at this site, he just lived here. It's not associated with any broad architectural, cultural, political, economic, or social history of the city or the Commonwealth. It is a poor and heavily altered version of a very common building type in the city, and is across the street from a large apartment building and 2 doors down from a 4-family of a very different building type. The property is very close to the Magoon Square T station, and more density at this location is a good thing. I would say calling it an Italianate revival at this point is a bit of a stretch. I guess you got to call it something. It does not really have the same massing and form as the other examples that are shown in the staff report on page 5, which are around it. It probably may at one time have, but it certainly doesn't now look like that. As such, the applicant asks that the house at 294 Lowell Street found not to be significant. And we're here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Is that it for you all, Attorney Dash, or is anybody else who'd like to speak before we switch to public comment?
No, we're here, but if there are questions, but I think there's nothing more to be said about
Okay.
it.
With that, then I will switch or change to the public comment portion of this hearing. If there are any members of the public who'd like to speak about this case, please raise your hand and staff will unmute you.
Chair Parks, this is Madison Anthony speaking. I do not see anyone raising their hand to speak.
Okay, thanks. In that case, I'll close the public comment portion of this hearing and turn this over to the commission. Anybody have any thoughts on this?
I'll take a first pass, I guess. I'll jump out into that silence. To me, it feels like it's, well, to Attorney Dash's point, it has been pretty heavily altered. It still has a fair amount of similarity with the buildings next to it, at least from the street front presence of it. You know, some of the additions to the rear and the back definitely are there. It's definitely not the nicest example of the Italianate revival on the street, but it still fits into, you know, the pattern of a few buildings around it. You know, I not that we're discussing it yet, but I don't know where I would fall on the preferably preserved question, but at least to me, this feels like it's fitting into a pattern of the streetscape that, granted, is interrupted by other buildings, but even when the house was built, across the street was a large, where the 70s apartment buildings are now, was a large school building at one point, according to the historic maps. So there's always been a little bit of diversity on the street, and it fits into the pattern and sort of the, I don't know, the sense of place, the genius loci of Somerville streetscapes, where there are a lot of these Italianate. I feel like it has a level of historic significance to me in that context. You know, it's not a stellar example, but it's part of a pattern and part of a rhythm on this particular street. And while Attorney Dash makes a lot of good points about the need for housing and everything else, that all falls more in the preferably preserved realm of questioning rather than significance on its own merits to me. So that's sort of my thoughts anyway.
Thank you.
I would agree with everything Mr. Shagnon said. the only other comment I'd like to add is, I understand that they're gonna take the long garages down in the back. And of course, at this point, we don't know what they would put there, which I guess is not our concern. However, just knowing that something modern would be put there would completely disrupt the streetscape. And I think that the place should be saved. And I also would like to say, I'm not sure which staff member did the this report, but they did a great job because it was very entertaining. So thank you very much. And I would also like to comment that you kind of left us in a cliffhanger with the article when the two gentlemen were fighting in the courtroom. And so I would have really loved to frivolously spend the city of Somerville taxpayer dollars to find the follow-up to that story, but I guess I'll have to look it up myself. But thank you for doing such a great job.
Ask them to email their sources. You can look it up.
Mr. Chairman, could I briefly say something?
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. And so thank you, Ms. Price, for saying that. And so I feel that, as a senior staff member, it's incumbent upon me to make sure that specific staff members are recognized for the work that they do. So I'm really glad that you said this. And I would like to call out Lexi Payne for the research that she did on this. Again, she's one of our newer staff members. And I too was rather spellbound by the article that she found. I thought she found some great finds. And I'm also really pleased with the way, as Mr. Dash said earlier, that there's a map and she's like really orienting you, to the locale. But yeah, so we're very lucky to have some staff members who really dig up some good information, and whatever the determination is by the commission itself. I am always happy to know that our staff members have done their due diligence in looking up, what the genesis of this property is. So thank you for calling that out. And again, I just wanted to mention Lexi Payne was the one that did do that report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, thanks. And yeah, I would concur about that. This report's really something to spend some time reading. Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts or comments on this?
Mine are essentially the same, so I won't repeat them, except to just note all of the things about both the building itself and the quality of the staff report.
Okay, thanks. I guess that leaves me. Yeah, I see. I mean, this is one of these areas where it's really the relation on the streetscape as a front gable facing house is the only thing of significance remaining in this, in that it's basically had a full third floor added to it, albeit recessed. It's been modified pretty badly that way. One could argue that could be removed, I suppose. The porch is gone. So I don't have a great attachment to the building in this particular instance because the streetscape is a bit of a hodgepodge. There are three buildings together that are sort of similar this way. But as Attorney Dash pointed out, there's quite a lot else going on the street. I could certainly entertain this being significant for that reason, and then see how things go beyond that. But it's pretty, to me, it's sort of tenuous that way. Just because of the modifications of the building and the fact that it's not part of a commanding rhythm on the street there. It's just three buildings that are similar gable orientation. Anybody else have any thoughts on this? I want to respond to anything?
Are we ready for a motion then?
I think, and then nobody has anything else to add, we could take a motion.
I will move that the commission vote on finding the property at 294 Lowell Street historically significant.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Shagnon, seconded by Ms. Price. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we'll do a roll call then. Ms. Price,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes,
Mr. Shagnon,
Yes.
and I'll go along with, I'll vote yes in this case. But I would like one of you to make the findings on this.
Well, I guess given that I did all the talking about it beforehand, I can take a stab at that. Because we can't declare it significant just on the basis of Lexi's wonderful staff report, so that doesn't make it into the findings. I suggest that we find it significant on the grounds of its representation of a common building type within the street, and therefore its pattern within the overall streetscape, and is a better way to phrase this. Let me take a second stab at that. Yeah, that it is that it's a relatively it contributes to the sense of the streetscape as part of a group of buildings. Yeah. I don't know. Is there anything worth adding to that? I don't know that the massing is so well preserved on its own. I guess from the streetscape, it retains, from the perspective of the streetscape, it retains much of its original sense of massing. And therefore it contributes to the, boy, I'm sorry to Kristen during the minutes on this. I'm struggling to find the right phrasing here. Yeah. Someone else want to take a stab at putting that mishmash into a more coherent form? I'm having trouble with that.
Dick?
you, so DJ, why don't you say it again and then let me see if I can work with
Yeah, well, maybe if I say it again, we won't need to have it rephrased.
it. Uh-huh.
That it is as part of the context of the group of buildings it sits in, it retains enough of its original massing to contribute a sense of the historic streetscape and association with a typical building type for the city that speaks to the architectural history of the city as a whole. I think that's probably
I think that's good as stated.
yeah. I think we'll go with that then.
Okay.
As my suggestion.
Sure, we have
I'll second
a
that.
findings proposed by Mr. Shagnon, seconded by Mr. Bauer. All in favor of adopting these findings?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And I'll do the roll call again, starting with Ms. Price,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Shagnon,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. So thank you, Attorney Dash. We'll see you next time around to see whether this ought to be properly preserved.
That be July 15th, Mr. Chair?
I believe so. Is that correct, Addison?
This is Madison Anthony speaking. That is correct. And
Okay.
I think the advertising deadline for that is Monday. So if you could drop a check off before then, that would be fantastic.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Um, okay, that's our only public hearing tonight. And then we have other business. We have three things. One is a discussion of several state laws, I believe, that are proposed, minutes, and then a CPC update. The second two are fairly average standard things. We have staff with us tonight, Ms. White. If you would like to launch into that subject, start off with that.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. As you all might know, there has been a proposed change by a single entity, the executive director of the Massachusetts chapter of the AIA, American Institute of Architects. So, Mr. Parks, I'm looking at you here. I know you weren't involved in this, but FYI, you'll have some clout, I think.
But I was
So-
involved with.
I'm sorry.
I was involved with what here?
So it's the Massachusetts chapter of the American Institute of Architects that has
Oh.
proposed this change.
Oh, I missed that
mhm.
part. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah, I
yes,
did.
yes.
Huh.
Unbeknownst to any of us, and when I say any of us, I mean just about every municipality, the Massachusetts Historical Commission, Preservation Mass, and my colleagues in the field, there has been a proposal to amend MGL Chapter 40C that's been submitted to the state. And there's been a proposal to amend MGL Chapter 40, Section 8D, which is the chapter of the Massachusetts General Law that allows for the establishment of historical commissions. Anyhow, so the major changes are as follows. So MGL Chapter 40C change, that proposal is for there to be a demolition delay proviso within MGL Chapter 40C, within local historic districts for buildings that are considered significant. And it lays out a whole review process. It does that. It also, the other major change is that if a local historic district commission feels that there needs to be a consultant that they need to hire to give them expert advice, be it on, structural engineering or a structural report or preservation methods, whatever it happens to be, that they can require an applicant to pay reasonable fees for whatever consultant the commission hires. That I don't really have much of I don't have any problem with that. That's helpful. I think that the way that particular proviso is written out is very confusing and convoluted and gets into the minutia of details that a municipality has a right to determine for themselves, like how to set up an account to collect the fees and how to distribute the fees and all that type of thing. So that to me is almost neither here nor there. The problem that I have as a professional is that having a demolition delay period that can be invoked and that can expire within a local historic district completely derogates from the purpose of a local historic district. There's no need to determine whether or not a building within a local historic district is historically significant, because buildings that are put in local historic districts are considered historically significant by their very nature. If a demolition period were invoked within a local historic district under this proposal, once it expired, then the applicant could demolish the building. So it really takes away the ability of a historic district commission from negotiating with an applicant, from saying no, and from working with an applicant to find other means of working with a building that they might want to demolish. Like, let's think about 148 Morrison. What if they just wanted to demolish that instead of adding on to it? Right, that row house, or 187 Central Street, or what is it, 42 Bow Street, right? A lot of buildings that we as a commission, as a city, have allowed for applicants to make reasonable and sometimes substantial changes to, in order like to create more units, rehabilitate the building, bring it back online to being more economically viable for the owner. Right now, demolition can be applied for in a local historic district by virtue of submitting an application to alter that district, right? To alter a property within that district. A demolition is considered an alteration. So in my opinion, and the opinion of all the professionals from like the directors, former directors of Massachusetts Historical Commission, members of the Massachusetts Historical Commission, and other colleagues, there is no need for this proviso, and it actually undermines the strength and purpose of having a local historic district established under 40C. So that is my 5-minute speech on the challenges that I see with this substantively. Now, we know that there was a hearing on this, a committee hearing on this proposal on June 10th. Nobody knew about it. Now, that's not necessarily unusual at the state level. However, we didn't even hear from our state rep, state senator, anything about anything in the legislature that could affect us like this. It seems like my other colleagues have not heard from their reps about this either. So we have 14 days to submit written comment to the committee and for their consideration, and whether or not they move it out of committee with any type of recommendation, whether or not they let it die in committee. We don't know what their position is going to be, but I do think that if members of this commission have an opinion, I do think that it is worth you discussing what your opinions might be. And if you want to write a letter, I would suggest discussing the general content that you would like to address and authorizing Chair Parks to, I mean, somebody on the commission, but probably Chair Parks to draft that so that it can be sent out in time to meet the public comment deadline. As staff, I won't be doing it because staff alone will probably be writing in its own separate letter of opposition to the proposal. We think it's very ham-handed. It is contradictory to other provisos in the law that are out there and other municipal rights. And so we think that, we have a motto that's, well, my position is we have a motto that says municipal freedom leads to national strength. And this takes away, in my opinion, a lot of our municipal freedom to determine our own path forward, and for the commission to exercise its administrative powers.
Thank you. I'm just realizing I spent time poring over one of the two attachments, but for not even realizing there was a second one that was twice as long. So I'm kind of annoyed with myself here. But it seems like that they're largely similar content. That this is between the 8D and the. Never actually gone a
40C.
40C.
Yeah.
40C and 8D. How are they practically? How are they different? They're different chapters. 40.
Yep. So chapter 40C is what allows you to create LHDs. Right, that's what you administer. So that's when like 148 Morrison wants to come and they want to add an addition, that's what you're reviewing it under. Central Library, not Central Library, West Branch Library wanted to do an addition and some restoration work. You reviewed that. That's a chapter 40C local historic district as well.
But,
Um,
okay, yeah, 8D, how's that different?
8D is the provision of Massachusetts state law that allows for historical commissions to exist. So historical commissions are the ones that that administer demolition delay laws if a community has them. But it allows historical commissions also, you know, for communities that don't have demolition delay laws, they also can be advisory bodies for things like, you know, Community Preservation Act and, you know, other things that a city might want to consider. Chapter 8D is also where it says that y'all can't be paid. And that's not changing. They didn't make that suggestion. But so some towns have a separate historical commission and a separate historic districts commission if they have districts. And in other communities, the two are together as one, and that's what you guys are. You are both a historical commission and you're a historic districts commission. You administer LHDs and you administer the demolition. State calls it demolition delay, just so for ease of conversation, demolition delay. You just wear a different hat depending on the type of application that you have. So when you were administering demolition delay over this last case, you were acting as a historical commission under those powers.
Okay,
The other thing that's essential to know is that in order to be a certified local government, which the city of Somerville is, which entitles us to, these days, who knows? But federal grant funds and federal grant funds distributed to state level, it allows us to apply for a lot of those funds because we're a certified local government. And the concept of a certified local government is encapsulated in the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966, through which Section 106 reviews derive, et cetera. The National Register derives out of that type of thing. So you have to exist in some form in order for us to get some grant money, if there's any left.
so I looked over in detail what was proposed for 8D, but I didn't look over 40C yet. I'm in scanning it. It seems like the changes are very similar between the.
Correct. I mean, it's in some ways it's very duplicative, right? So, you know, what the change to chapter 40 section 8D is doing is it's engendering the ability automatically to have demolition delay if you have a historical commission.
That's what I gathered from it. And then it also describes, as you talked about, the process for requiring consultants and experts and
Correct.
and appealing and allowing towns to allow repeals and things like that.
Mhm.
I mean, it appears to me, I took some notes and questions. If I could just sort of rattle them off about it. And my just had a crash. All right. I just have to reload my word processing software, which just crashed on me while I was opening it up. Well, the base thing is the conclusion is that the act of basically creating the demolition delay ordinance requirements as part of the historic district, throwing it all in the same ball, by default allows, they don't overlap. So if
No.
and that's what I hadn't really seen yet, just looking at 8D, because 8D, like what about the way this is phrased says that if a demolition delay expires, that other constraints contained within the document still apply about not being able to make alterations without being approved by the commission if it's an historic district. That makes sense.
Yeah, so the way this is, I think, one of the other issues that several of us have with this is that it's very ham-handed in that what has been presented, that it doesn't refer to the rest of the document in any sort of logical sense. Because why would you have a demolition delay and have a delay on a demolition and then when that demolition expires, then all the other provisions of the of 40C still apply, which is you apply to alter and change. And so it kind of like leaves you in this sort of odd quagmire. So then does somebody apply to, can they just go and demolish the building, or then they apply to alter the building instead? It's
Yeah, I agree.
very
It's
nonsensical.
it's weird, and it would seem a fairly simple thing to clarify if someone had just gone and say, you know, that this applies to buildings that are not within local historic districts, or in something a little more
Right, right. I mean,
elegant than
because
that.
the way we function in Somerville right now is that the demolition delay, we write specifically so that people are aware, the demolition delay does not apply to local historic district buildings, right? And it doesn't apply to the D parcels and assembly and a few other places as well, right? And we have to say that specifically within the demolition delay law, to make it clear. Again, all that somebody has to do is apply for a certificate of appropriateness to demolish a building within a local historic district, and you can say yes or no.
Yeah,
Or you can say, hey, did you think about this? Or what if we do this instead? Or let's say somebody has a concrete block garage within a local historic district on a local historic district property.
yeah,
You're
it
probably going to say,
seems,
go ahead and demolish that.
yeah. And it seems when I first read it, it was when we first described it, I thought, well, someone's trying to pull the wool over our eyes, but they put so much work into. I can't decide whether there's an intention to do that, or if someone was just really sloppy about it and left that ambiguity there as a
think
risk little thing.
I think it's both. I think it's sloppiness, and I think that they thought that they were leaving an opening, but they're not. This is just an architectural firm that did this. And so, which, not to disparage an architectural firm, but,
No, go
you
for
don't have lawyers involved. You don't have, the type of expertise that we all have. I mean, at least a large municipality has, to do this type of work.
Yeah. I mean, I applaud in a sense. Yeah, if you could sort of make some boilerplate demo delay thing that towns can kind of absorb, and in that sense, I could see a logic behind it.
Mhm.
But it seems to be colliding. And also, the other question I had with it is, to what extent would this supersede pre-existing demo delay ordinances like ours, which are more evolved?
Right, exactly, which is far more evolved. And, this actually is, for us, the proposal to 8D would be quite regressive because it moves it back to considering buildings that are 50 years of age, and older. But
it.
we've said, hey, no, 75 is what we need to look at because we don't have anything that we want to consider at 50 years of age. We spent so much time working on our demolition review ordinance. We have a very strong culture of doing a memorandum of agreement. We have a very strong culture of, because we have that memorandum of agreement process, getting a better result from a design perspective, free zoning review. We're generating units, out of these buildings that are being demolished or that are being proposed to be demolished, because we have this consultative process in place. Now, Somerville is unique in that, because usually most other, so many other, I will say most other communities that have a demolition delay, they say like, oh, the person should consider selling the building and, other things they could do with it and blah, blah, blah. But there's no strong culture in these other communities of doing the work that we do. So we have established a culture where we get results for everybody involved.
I noticed on the third page of the 8D printout that there is some kind of ambiguous lingo about commissions may adopt and amend such rules and regulations not inconsistent with the provisions of this act, such forms that shall be deemed necessary. So I don't know sure if they're trying to leave the window open for people to adopt a modified version of that, but that's kind of like getting more into the weeds, and I think this is at this point.
No, but you bring a fair point up, because, so for example, the Zoning Act exists, right? Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 40A, and you adopt the Zoning Act, and then you create, then you amend it, you create your own zoning regulations that are consistent with the provisos set forth in 40A, but you have to follow you can't be less strict than what 40A allows for. So like, for example, 40A says you should, to paraphrase, you should basically almost never, ever issue a variance, right?
Yeah.
And so you can't change the criteria for reviewing a variance and derogate from 40A. But obviously our local laws do not replicate and spit out exactly what 40A says, for example. So yes, you can definitely say we're going to adopt like the historic that's 40, chapter 40, section 8D, and then we're going to like do these other things for, a demolition review. But it's just seems to be mixing metaphors, if you will, or mixing, milk and meat, in that like this is about establishing a commission, right? Largely about establishing a commission and like, limited powers of review. And it just seems like just demolition delay belongs someplace else and just not there. But that is a lesser concern of mine than the 40C and the ham-handed approach to that.
Okay, I've been sort of hogging it. Anybody else have thoughts on this or questions?
I definitely do have serious concerns about anything that subjects local historic districts to demolition delay as opposed to the process we have going, because I mean, much as Ms. White has a very good point about the strong track record of reaching consensus on a lot of projects, there's also a fairly strong history, and it's become even more so as things have gone to the 18-month delay period, where we get these demolition applications that they don't have any idea what they want to do yet. So there's no particular incentive to engage in discussion. They're just putting the application in as early as possible so that eventually the demolition delay expires and they can either do something with it or sell the property again without demolition, with it approved for demolition.
Sure, right, because it runs with the property, not with the person in Somerville,
Exactly.
right?
So, and I mean I think that's been, I think that to some extent the longer period has been, the intent was good of actively getting more teeth, and the results have been disappointing to me, I guess. The number of times that it would have been nice to have had a conversation about what the plans were and everything else, and
Sure.
to reach a memorandum of agreement, but it was no, we just started the ball rolling because 18 months from now we'll be finished with our design and ready to go.
Right. Now, I would say that the majority of the time when buildings go under delay in Somerville, the majority of the time we do get an MOA out of it. I mean, there are a couple of exceptions. Yeah, there are a couple of exceptions. But the majority of the time we get an MOA out of it. And again, we have, like right now in particular, we have a zoning code that is really, really challenging to get through. So by having a regular cadence of these meetings with people who, largely developers who want to demolish a building, we end up doing the zoning review for them ahead of time, right? We're normally like, we do the design, or they would wait out the delay, and, then they would start their design work, then they would start their review with ISD and blah, blah, blah. But this way we end up committing ISD to a regular monthly review. They're not going to catch absolutely everything, but the majority of the pitfalls and whatnot, like, oh, you're proposing a duplex here, but like actually this lot isn't wide enough, or you're proposing a row house, but you can't have a row house in this. I mean, it's just little things like that. Get all that out of the way and then get to the nitty gritty of like the dimensional details that they're going to need to watch out for. So that's what we do. We have, the one that you just approved a couple meetings ago, 33 vinyl, right?
Yeah.
I've found a lot of trip ups from a zoning perspective there that really would have caused him a hard time when he got to the building permit stage. So, and we're including like interior challenges too, that you're not reviewing the interior challenges, you're just reviewing, or the interior design, you're just reviewing the exterior. But we were able to catch a multitude of things that he was able to clear up well in advance. So that once he gets his MOA recorded, he can just apply for his building permit.
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge. That is like thousands and thousands of dollars of free consulting services basically that we're giving to people to do this. And we're getting units out of it. And that's the thing, right? We're getting the maximum number of units that we can get that the zoning allows on like any one of these individual properties. And these are people that have single properties. They're not interested in buying multiple properties next to them and don't have the capacity to in order to
Yeah.
create an enormous building with like dozens and dozens and dozens of units, right? So we can either get some increased density, you know, little by little here, because we're waiting and waiting and waiting for like the big density buildings like to even appear and get considered, but we can end up, you know, getting additional density and at least some good design out of it, you know, along the way.
Hmm.
But again, that's the Somerville culture, and that's been around for, you know, quite a long time. And honestly, other communities just do not have this culture. So we have had a lot of success with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been aware of that since the beginning here, where we
Yeah.
seek not to just shoot people down
No.
because we're grumpy. It's like we like to come to some, and that's kind of what makes our meetings so long sometimes, is we want to get to a workable thing rather than
Right.
commissions where like they
Oh.
just like say no in 5 minutes and you're on your
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's unproductive and unhelpful.
But as for this thing, I don't know how we want it. So I agree we should write a letter, or individually, or the more the better. And do we want to outline things? Is it something that we need to vote on somehow? Or just vote to allow a letter to be written, and then with certain points to be made within the letter, and then how it ends up getting spit out is finalized among me and staff or something like that? Like how's
I
that?
think, yeah, Mr. Bauer has something to say.
Yeah, so I was
Oh,
going to
Mr.
move that we authorize Chair Parks to send a letter on behalf of the commission.
I would second that.
And
Okay,
I think it is probably worth discussing and making sure that if there are any critical concerns any
Yes.
of us have, that we spell those out so the Chair Parks can be
Yes.
sure to include them. But
Yes.
I definitely am in favor of having Chair Parks write a letter also, so I'll second the motion.
okay.
And then we'll adopt findings on the letter.
Finding the letter. Yeah,
Not-
so thanks. I mean, I'm fine to do that. And I think what I'd like to come out of tonight is just sort of like bullet points as to what I want to cover in the letter, so that we're all in
Yeah.
agreement on the main points. And how it gets wordsmithed, or whatever you want to call it, will be settled later on. Because this has to go out before our next meeting, so it has to be.
That's correct. That's correct. And we can take care of sending that for you if you'd like. Or you
Okay.
can email it, but you should not email anything from your personal email, but we can, as staff, we can do it from the historic at email address.
So should we vote on, because we do have a motion on the table, we should vote on that and then just sort of decide. We don't have
The
to
bullet point, yeah,
incorporate that in the motion. Okay,
right.
great. So we have a motion by Mr. Bauer, second by Mr. Shagnon, to have me, in conjunction with staff, draft a letter representing our views as a commission on the content of these proposed state law changes. Without to
Mhm.
chapter 8D and 40, whatever it is, 40.
See,
All right, all in favor of that motion?
I,
Opposed? And we'll do, let me just get my Zoom screen back here. We'll do a roll call. Ms. Price,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
yes,
Mr. Shagnon,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. Okay, and since my Word program is back up and running, I'll take a stab, because I have a page of notes that I've already taken. But obviously the biggest deal, as we said right off the bat, was this question of basically allowing this demolition within historic districts.
well, allowing a demolition delay, because you already
Demolition delay.
can allow
Yeah.
demolition if you determine that it meets your criteria.
And I think I mean, allowing a demolition delay, if a municipality wants to do that, seems I mean, I certainly wouldn't advise them to because of the success we've had with, treating it as alterations. But I think that the way it's set up, that it seems to set one up by default for everybody without an exception for local historic districts.
I think it's two things. I
Okay.
think that I think right now it's like about putting that proviso of allowing for a demolition delay specifically within local historic districts as a separate entire, as just as like you ask for a certificate of appropriateness, you can ask to demolish a building and get a demolition delay. And when the delay is up, you can go demolish that local historic district building. When the purpose of putting something in an LHD
Is to prevent demolition.
is to prevent that demolition, is to protect that historic asset, is to encourage its rehabilitation, is to provide for the community, is to all those different things.
Yeah.
So really like the in a way, 8D, you kind of have less to worry about, right? Because we're already doing our own thing. We've already got we've already got a demolition delay, and we're probably just going to continue with it as it is. I think your biggest oomph is the LHDs. Because it totally derogates from the purpose of an LHD.
Yeah.
I'm curious, has Boston weighed in on this? Have you communicated with them, the landmarks folks and all that?
I haven't seen anything yet from Boston. I've definitely seen from Lowell. I've seen from, like I said, commissioners on the MHC. Who, by the way, the person who, or the entity that put this proposal forward claimed that they had been working with the MHC, and the MHC has come out flatly and denied that that has been the case.
Oh.
They also claimed that they had worked with Preservation Mass, which is like a statewide nonprofit for preservation. And the head of Preservation Mass actually wrote back to the listserv to say, you have not been working with us. And if you had one conversation with us several years ago about asking questions, that does not constitute working with us, nor does it constitute our agreement and acquiescence with the proposal. So they will be writing something against it as well.
Okay.
So I have to call a colleague of mine who is essentially is in my role over in Boston, and see what they're going to do about it, because Boston's a little bit of a mixed bag. They have like a local landmark designation, which is their own thing. And then they have some special act of the legislature districts still.
That's what I was wondering, because they have a different setup. So I wonder, are they outside
right.
of this
And
thing?
they have a couple of 40C. So they've
Okay.
got a whole bag of cats over there.
Because if you go to, I mean, tell the people in Back Bay that they can demolish Com Ave in 18 months, that would be like Minutemen running down to state.
Maybe a different type of revolution, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's point one. And that's obviously the biggest, and we can juice that up a little bit, goose it up. And would you say another point we want to make is this issue of overlapping with our demolition delay? I mean, I guess it's a question of how detailed we want to get with this, because our basic idea is this can't pass as it is. Do we want to give them a list of other issues we have with it? And is that one of them, any conflicts with our own demolition delay process? Like, we define what constitutes demolition as 50% of the outside envelope or something, and in their definitions, it sort of says any modification, which is a little bit sloppy, I think. So should we try to address that in a letter to them?
I think I would be inclined not to address that. The real problem isn't the way that they've defined demolition delay. If somebody wants to propose a bill, statewide bill authorizing demolition delay ordinances, we should then weigh in on the details. But here, the basic
Okay.
problem, as Sarah says, is simply that it takes what right now is something that protects property and turns it into being merely demolition delay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that would make it more succinct and more likely to actually get read.
That's helpful.
But is there anything else that we ought to discuss, having just said that?
I mean, It's interesting because there are some portions of it that we'd actually be in support of. It's not that we're opposed to the suggestion as a whole.
Yeah.
And
For
it's,
which one? Are you talking about the 8D?
by whichever one has things like, enabling commissions to hire consultants and charge the fees back to applicants if appropriate to the project. So,
Right. So I think, so that's also in the 40C proposed
Okay.
changes. So, I mean, it's certainly like, two things can two things can exist in the same person, right? You
Mhm.
can like one thing or you can be one thing and not be another. Or you could be two diametrically opposed things depending on the circumstances.
Yeah.
So I think that you can certainly, if you are opposed to the demolition delay proposal, then you can very clearly say that. But if you say that you think that, consideration that the ability to hire a consultant and require that fee to be paid by the applicant given specific circumstances, if you think that that's a reasonable proviso, then you can also say that too.
Yeah.
But it seems like there's a lot of clarification in general that just needs to be made with whatever language gets put forward.
Yeah. I
Is
mean,
also what I'm hearing.
as someone who works with various application processes, I would love if more of them were standardized between municipalities, but there's a reason they're not, and it's
Right,
right. And I think
right.
most of this, including that provision, which otherwise seems like throwing a bone to the historical commissions,
Hmm.
if you were to look at it in such a light and not knowing the folks who wrote it, I have no idea what their intentions were, but it feels like it's all just set up to make a lot more work for architects in various forms, either as consultants or as people doing projects that can go ahead because the buildings are allowed to get demolished.
Funny you should say that. It was an
Yeah.
architectural firm that presented this. The guy works for an architectural firm.
Go
Mhm.
figure.
Yeah,
I'm remembering way back when they first required continuing education in our state for architects, and rather conveniently, the NCAR people who were pushing it were the ones that happened to offer these overpriced monographs that you could take. So it's like
Yeah.
ginning up business for themselves.
Yeah. They haven't yet talked to the landscape architectural folks to push that through.
just wait.
It's become kind of silly. You basically go and watch a video about why somebody's window is better than the others, and
Oh,
you take
yeah.
a test that's designed to show how much you love their window, and that's it. But a few little details I noticed. One was that they didn't really separate the time-wise a process for significance and preferably preserved. They just
Correct,
you do them both together.
correct.
Mhm.
And is it supposed to follow the process for determinations for certificates, which is spelled out as how long you have? Can you just be, make a decision within a reasonable amount of time? I mean, when I say this is ham-handed, I mean ham-handed. It is very sloppy. One of the things that they claim to is like, oh, they put something in about like solar panels and energy
Yeah, I saw that. That
and
was like
whatnot.
out of nowhere.
That was just a gimme. There have been commissions, in some places in the state that have like chafed at some of that stuff, which I find, and I know you guys are in agreement with this, I find utterly ridiculous. You allow us to approve solar panels now, and we're just like, solar panels, okay, great, here you go, solar panels. Don't take off your entire slate roof to do it, but like, here's your solar panels, go ahead. Heat pumps, go ahead. Whatever it is, like insulation, this, and the other thing, like none of that is even looked at by you guys. So like, I understand that there are some places that are difficult. You guys are not the ones, right? Like you guys just like, yeah, go do it. Green the building.
Yeah.
It's something about like we can't get in the way of voting to demolish existing solar energy systems. That was I read that. I had to read it a few times. I just couldn't figure out why. It just made no sense.
That doesn't make any sense, does
Why
it?
would historic passive solar?
Right.
Well, passive solar that's over however old.
That's true, right? Yep.
If the solar panels had still been on the White House, we wouldn't be able to declare them.
Okay, well, so we won't bother to draft a letter that really gets into all this. Um.
You
Yeah,
might just want to stick to what you find to be the most problematic.
yeah. I mean, in some ways, it's pretty hardcore. Like, the consequence of violating, of demolishing when you're not supposed to. They say no, that they give a 5 to 10 year period for no work out there.
No building permit.
$5 a day fine, and stuff which I think
Yeah,
would get
yeah.
some. If they can
Would
get that,
Yeah, it would certainly get their attention, but at the same time, we'd spend more of our time in court trying to defend that, I think. And I don't, the state has set laws about what you can charge per day, and I don't know, I just don't know if that, if a proposal of $25,000 a day derogates from that or not.
until what, they rebuild it, like, okay, that's a 2 year process to recreate the historic whatever, but yeah, so that's all right. So we'll write a thing that basically talks about the primary concern about jurisdiction and in the appearance that they're allowing demo delay within historic districts.
Mhm.
And I won't get into the other little tidbits of it. I could sort of wrap in some of the history, a little bit of the Somerville, what we've done, just so they know.
I think that that's a good idea. I think that's a good idea, yeah.
Because we've had 2 iterations. We've, like, our demolition delay ordinance has been around for X number of years. It's evolved. We've revised it in a way that's more fitting of
Mhm.
our town. And we like to think it's
Yep,
something that we'd want to keep in lieu of whatever they've done here.
yep.
So
I mean, you've had it for over 20 years.
yeah.
Yeah.
So so am I hearing that, so yeah, so if you want to talk about those points, I think that's fine. If you want to draft up a draft, would you email it to me and to Madison? And so we can, if you want us to look it over, or if you
Sure.
just want to draft it up and say like, hey, on behalf of the blah, 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 we voted on this night unanimously to send a letter detailing our concerns with the proposal, et cetera, et cetera. I would say make sure that you write that you voted on it. And I think that that's important.
Oh, in our
Um,
letter. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So let's see, 14 days is the 24th. It's due by. I don't want to send it on the 24th. So the 24th is next Tuesday. Crap. Can you get us a draft? Can you get us a draft by end of day Thursday? I know
I should be able to, yeah.
Madison and I have the day off, but if you have it to us by end of the day Thursday, we'll look at it first thing Friday morning.
Okay. And that's fine, because I'm going to try to get out for 3 days up to see my sister on Friday, driving up in the afternoon. So
Oh,
that
yes, to
that
that
timeline will
barn
get
in
better.
Maine with no reception.
Yeah, but that's would just be there through Monday. But so if I get this out to you by Thursday, that just takes that off my plate and not something to worry about.
Right.
And I could make any revisions Friday morning before we go, or whatever.
And I'll be honest with you, ideally, because we do have Thursday off and we won't see it until
right.
Friday morning. If you could get it to us, like late afternoon tomorrow, at the very least, I can start looking at it. I don't know if Madison can, but I can at least. And then that way, like if she and I could have time to confer, then we can get you responses so that you can then get your last stuff out and your final draft sent to us before you go. Because I would need your final draft. Well, we would need your final draft really on Friday, now that I think about it. In order for us to send it for you, we would want to send it no later than Monday.
Okay, because Monday is the
Yeah. Yeah, Tuesday is the deadline. I don't want to wait that long because God forbid,
yeah.
never wait till the last day.
We don't need me to physically sign this, do we? You can just use my
I'll use your auto signature.
auto
Yeah.
pen. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're okay with that.
Sarah.
Yeah, that's fine. So if
Yes.
I if this does dribble into Friday, for example, it's not like if I'm not back till Monday night, it's not like we can't issue it.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
All right.
I'm
Sarah,
sorry. Yes.
so if you wouldn't mind forwarding my draft letter to Chair Parks.
Oh,
Oh.
sure.
Do you want me to just make sure it covers your bases, or is there?
Well, I mean, I'm pretty aggressive, so
Okay.
so you may want a lighter touch.
Not a problem. I will take care of that
Thank you.
as soon as I get off. Yeah. And I'm sorry that Ms. Price sent me an email this morning around 10:45, and unfortunately it went to my junk mailbox. I just found it right before this meeting, so sorry about that. Good thing I check my junk occasionally.
Okay.
All right.
So that is settled, and there are actually two other things on our agenda. One of which we just need to vote on our meeting minutes.
And with that, I shall depart. Thank you all
Oh,
very
okay.
much. I apologize for taking so much time. Madison, I apologize to you for taking so much time because I know it puts you later, but I am going to drop off. Yes, please do that, Madison.
Okay. Good night.
Awesome. Good night. Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. We have meeting minutes. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes?
I read through them. I don't see any edits. The only question I have, and it's just a question, is in like 80, like, let's see, on the last sentence of 80 Hinckley Street, it says the recommended conditions in the staff memo, with the exception of the fourth condition, is what we voted on. The question I have is the staff memo attached to this, or how does a citizen find the staff memos? Do they have to go in and search for them on their own to
So
patch that
we-
together?
yeah, we have a reports and decisions page where we publish all our staff memos. It's like the web page that we link to you guys when I send out the agenda is the page that they have access to. They just have to go to the website to get it.
Okay. Okay, because the reason why I comment on this is I recently, as a real estate agent in real life, I had to dig into some meeting minutes from the condo board. And if it weren't for those meeting minutes, I would have been in hot water. So I was very grateful that the minutes were detailed. And as I was
Mhm.
reading through this, it dawned on me that, those conditions aren't there. And so I'd have to match those up nowadays. I mean, those were printed materials from the 80s that I dug through. So anyway, as long as they're accessible, that's great. Thank you. That's all.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, I think that's definitely worth noting. Maybe in the future we could actually write the entire condition just in case anything ever happens to the website.
Right. Right. I don't want to make more work, and I don't want to change the way things are done, but it was just a comment, putting real life to
Mhm.
some of these things. So. Okay.
So I have a comment, which isn't necessarily an edit, with regard to the May 6th minutes with regard to Wheatland Street.
Mhm.
Now, the vote on Wheatland Street was 2-2. And staff stated that a tie vote meant the building was deemed to be not historically significant. I think that's contrary to the ordinance. As I read the ordinance, a tie vote does not mean not historically significant. And so we asked that the determination be reviewed by the city solicitor. Was it reviewed, and did we get an opinion from them?
So the opinion was, in order to find something like historically significant, if there is a tie vote, we're supposed to always issue in the affirmative, like for that specific reason.
That's I'm sorry, I shouldn't have cut you off.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, we're supposed to always issue in the affirmative. Um, if there's like not, especially if there's not a clear consensus for that specific reason, because it's supposed to be the majority has to find it
Yeah.
historically significant.
Yeah, I think,
Mhm.
in my opinion, that's a misreading of the ordinance, which doesn't say we ever have to find things significant. It says we have to affirmatively find them to be not significant. And so in this case, we did not
Oh,
affirmatively
yeah.
find it to be not significant, and that's the test under the ordinance, not whether it's significant, but whether it's not significant. And that appears in I've forgotten, it appears in section C3 of the ordinance, which says no building may undergo demolition except under the provisions and may only be permitted if one of the following applies. And several of them are exempt, or if the commission lifts it. The one that's relevant here is number 3. The building is determined by the commission or its designee to not be significant. So in this case, we did not determine it to be not significant. We were split. And so as I read the ordinance, that means that they can't demolish. Because it doesn't talk about an affirmative vote of significance, it talks about an affirmative vote of not significant.
I am going to ask Sarah White to hop back on because
Uh-huh.
she knows more about what
Okay,
the decision was on there than
okay,
I do.
thanks.
Other than that question, is there anything else that any other edits people have?
I wasn't there. I have no idea.
Okay. And
It's a
here's
good one.
Welcome back, Sarah. Could
Can't
you
sway.
give us the rundown on the discussion about what a tie vote does in cases of historic significance? They just brought up the we're looking at the minutes for the basic
Yes.
thing, and Madison said there was a discussion with the city solicitor about that.
So we talked about, let me back up a second. So basically, when something is brought to a vote, like if you brought up like I make a motion that blah blah blah, 6 Wheatland is historically significant. Somebody seconds the motion, fine. And then you vote. And then you have 2 saying aye, right? 2 that agree that it's historically significant and 2 that nay, 2 disagree that it's historically significant. So therefore, a tie vote means that motion fails. Right?
That's correct.
That it is not. So it is not historically
No,
significant.
but that's not what a failed vote means on that motion. And partly you can see if the motion had been, I move that this building is not significant and it failed, what would you say the outcome was?
Then it is significant.
Right, and it can't possibly be that a tie vote either means it is significant or isn't significant, depending on whether the motion was framed in the negative or in the positive. And the ordinance, in my opinion, makes it quite clear that the test is whether the commission determines that it's not significant. So section C3 says that demolition is not permitted unless the building is determined by the commission or its designee to not be significant. We did not determine it to not be significant. Since it's a tie vote, we didn't determine one way or the other. And the ordinance says, therefore, that a tie vote means no demolition.
I mean, the ordinance doesn't specifically say that.
It does. I mean, it doesn't say a tie vote means it, but what the ordinance says, no demolition unless, quote, the building is determined by the commission or its designee to not be significant. and we did not determine it to not be significant. We had a tie vote, so we didn't actually determine it one way or the other.
So I guess well, one, for conversation's sake, and two, to be devil's advocate. So then what would you, so then does that building then remain sort of in a stasis?
No, I think at that point they can't demolish it. It's the equivalent of our having said it was significant, because under the ordinance, you can't demolish unless it is not significant. So
So
the
then that they would
default
go
is no
forward,
demolition.
sorry, so that they would go forward for preferably preserve then?
Yes,
So you're saying that the default within our ordinance is that every building over 50 or whatever, 75 years old
75.
is significant unless we determine otherwise.
Well, functionally. I mean, it's not worded that way. It says no demolition unless we determine it's not significant. But no demolition is the equivalent of significant.
So this is kind of
Hmm.
a little over my head, and I don't think I'm qualified to make the final call. You make a good point, Dick.
Uh-huh.
And how could we get this resolved so it's not really a lingering, because it's going to come up at some point again.
It'll come up again, I'm sure. We could wait. I mean, we can ask the city solicitor. I think that we will be waiting a long, just so you know, we can ask, but
Yeah.
I think that we're going to be waiting a long time for a response just because of everything else that's going on right now with the lawsuit we have against the Trump administration, amongst other things.
Understandable,
Well,
and I
more
certainly
important.
would not want anything to interfere with that. And
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
and I think with regard to Wheatland, based on the advice we were given, that decision is made. So I'm
Right.
not trying to reopen that decision.
Sure.
Maybe it's
So-
the kind of thing where, Dick, could you be comfortable writing your argument into something that you could send, that Sarah could send on, or
Sure.
because you articulated it better than I would.
Uh-huh.
Because on the flip side, and then general concept is that
Uh-huh.
you can't restrict someone unless you vote. Like the default is less
Uh-huh.
restrictive. You know, if we don't vote on a special permit, then they get it. Like if we just, isn't that the way general state or
Well,
stat-
I think depending on the context, the default could sort of be anywhere. So somebody comes to us in an historic district and asks for a certificate of appropriateness, and we don't say yes, then that's the equivalent of no.
Right, and they can then come back and ask for the same thing again, and the same thing again, and the same thing again. Now, the difference with zoning is like a special permit or something, if you say no, you can't come back for, well, a variance, you can't come back for a couple years, unless you do a repetitive petition, and that's like a whole mishegas. So, Dick, if you want to write up the scenario, the citation, and what you think, please, Lord, please write what you
Okay.
think in plain English, not legalese. And if you send it
I should
over,
tell you that I spent most of today working on a training on how to teach lawyers to write clearly and not in legalese.
their minds must have been blown to smithereens. If you could do that and then send it to Madison, and just copy me, but send it
Okay.
to Madison, then she and I can make sure that it makes sense to us so that we know we
Sure.
can get into like Cindy's mind. Well, it's gonna go with Cindy, and then she'll have to send it to David Shapiro and get in their mind, blah,
Okay.
blah, and then we can lob it over and and hopefully we'll hear from them,
Yeah.
so that, to your point, so that, going
Okay.
forward in the future, we have some resolution as to how to move forward on
Okay,
that.
sure.
the state must have taken this up. I can't imagine we're the first town to have this.
Oh, I'm
Well,
sure not. I'm
the
sure.
state.
I'm sure
Yeah.
we're not the first one, but right now at this point, considering what's
Right, but some of it was a
proposed.
question of how the ordinance is drafted. That's how this particular one
Yeah. All
That's right.
drafted.
That's
If
right.
the
That's right.
ordinance were drafted to say you can demolish unless the commission says it's significant, then a tie vote would mean that they could go ahead and demolish. It's just
Right.
how this one is
Yeah.
drafted. But
Right.
if
I don't know if we
if,
crib
if
that
I
language.
lost a case, say in federal court at the First Circuit Court of Appeals, and I went to the Supreme Court and I got a tie vote, that means I lose because I lost at the First Circuit and the Supreme Court didn't reverse it. If I won at the First Circuit and the other side went to the Supreme Court and got a tie vote, that would mean I won because I won below and the Supreme Court didn't reverse that.
Oh,
So it's a question of what the default is. And here, as I understand the ordinance, the default is no demolition unless, and then the ordinance lists 6 situations under which they can demolish. And, you know, like the time period has run out, we've lifted the time period, it's not within 75 years, it's exempt. But the one that's relevant here is no demolition unless we determine it's not significant.
okay.
Could you also put as part of your write-up, Dick, that you would contend that by virtue of the vote that was had and by, you know, virtue of blah 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 section, that therefore that would mean that a building, whether it's 6 Wheatland or whatever, would then have to go on to be considered preferably preserved or not? Because I think that that's a portion. That's why I asked that question. Like, okay, so then what's the
That's right.
next?
That's right. And the preferably preserved, by the way, is framed the same way. No demolition unless it's determined to not be preferably preserved.
Okay,
So again,
right.
a tie vote would mean no demolition.
Say that as
Right.
well. Actually, you might as well, since you go on for that too, because otherwise I can hear him. David Shapiro's going to ask, so like, what do you do? Is it just going to sit
Okay.
there in stasis? Because I'm like
Uh-huh.
trying to channel him in the questions that he would ask as well.
Sure.
Okay,
For,
good.
for the purpose of the meeting minutes, do the minutes as written reflect that concern of yours? Dick, let me go back and pull them open.
I think I'm satisfied, given where we are now. In the minutes, what we said is the commission asked that this determination be reviewed by the city solicitor.
Okay.
And so staff took it to the city solicitor, got an answer. For the reasons that I've given, I'm not satisfied with the answer, and so we're gonna follow up. But for purposes of the minutes, you know, I think the minutes cover it. We made a decision based on the commission's understanding at that point. We said we would go to the city solicitor. We did that. So I don't think we need to do anything
Okay.
more with the minutes.
In that case, unless anybody has any other changes, we could get a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, so moved.
A
Second the motion.
motion by Mr. Bauer, second by Mr. Shagnon, all in favor of approving the minutes, May 6th.
Aye.
Opposed? And I'll do our roll call. Ms. Price,
Yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Aye.
Mr. Shagnon,
I will abstain.
Shagnon abstains, and I'll vote yes. And the last little tidbit is a CPC
Let me,
update.
if I might for a moment, Eric, just to go back. So I just want to make sure, by the way, that I'm looking at the correct version of the ordinance, although I don't think this is a difference that makes a difference. So I have it as the September 24th, 2020 version.
No, there's an update that's updated in December of 2022. However, so I would cite that one because
Right, I
that's
want
the
to get
one.
the correct one. I don't think that it is different. When I looked online, I couldn't find an obvious one, but the 2020 version seemed to be the most recent one I could find.
Yeah, so I think that that's so it should be in Muni code is the most recent one should be the December 2022 one, but I will
Okay.
tell you that the only difference between those two versions is the difference between a 12-month delay and an 18-month delay.
Mhm.
And the December 2022 one has the 18-month
Okay.
delay, but I would refer to that 2022 version.
And this is in the Muni Code Library?
It should be in the Muni code library, section Article 2 housing, section 7-28.
Okay.
Not that I've worked with that for 10 years. Okay. I'm gonna zip and meet my husband for dinner.
Okay.
Madison, you know how to get a hold of me if you need me.
All right, we'll do.
Yep. I'll
Yeah,
wait
have
left
fun.
as a
And,
CPC update.
you know, since we're also doing shout outs, I do want to say, I want to say something to Madison because like she hasn't had a lot of reports to do lately, but hers are always excellent. But Madison has taken over this commission. It's been almost a year, Madison, since Wendy left. Right. And Madison, poor soul, ended up having to inherit the commission. And I don't say that because of like you guys. It's just like Madison had never done any sort of historic work before. So she's had to get up to speed, learn a new commission, learn a new way of doing things. She handles all of the emails that come in on like our historic @ general email box. So she's got to have the knowledge, the wherewithal, and all that stuff. So in all seriousness, we owe Madison a big thank you for stepping in to do something that she was not trained to do and not expected to do. And I'm not blowing smoke. I really do mean it, Madison, because you've been a great addition to this team and you've been an absolute huge help to me. And I really appreciate you stepping up. I mean, I know you didn't have a choice, but you could have really you could have, really had a poor attitude about it, and you didn't. And I just want to say it's been just as great working with you as it was for me to work with Wendy. So I really do want to thank you for that, and I think it's really important that everybody here hears that and that it's on the public record as well.
Oh, thank you.
Very nice. Yes.
You
I
betcha.
agree.
You betcha. All
Things are
right,
working swimmingly.
cool.
Can I
Thank you all very much.
make a
And
motion
Madison,
for a
I'll talk
vote
to you
of
tomorrow.
thanks to Madison?
Say that again.
Want to move for a vote of thanks to Madison.
I'll second that.
Okay, vote of thanks by Mr. Bauer, second by Mr. Shagnon. All in favor of thanking Madison?
All right.
Bye.
Anybody opposed?
And not
Miss-
even a tie vote.
Not even a tie vote, the affirmative,
Well, yeah, thank you, everyone.
sure. Yeah, it's been
Awesome.
great having you.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good night.
Um,
I'll talk to you guys
bye,
later.
Sarah.
Madison, I'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right, talk to you then.
Bye.
The only little tidbit with the CPC update is that we are, as it relates to historic, we're sort of going, oh yeah, well, last hearing as you know, there's a tax increase, so the CPC is suddenly having more money, or will have more money to spend, twice as much. We're still hashing out when that money becomes available. There's some discrepancy about when it becomes, the fiscal year versus some other thing. And I was talking with Roberta early today, and we're sort of in limbo about whether we have all of it available to us or some portion of the tax increase. At the last hearing, it was decided, because we got a lot of requests to up affordable housing, and we nudged the percentages just a little bit. We tweaked affordable housing, which was getting 50% to 55%, and open space and historic preservation both nudged down just a little bit by 2% and 3% each. And well, I felt a little bit offended that we're already at the lowest end anyway, historic preservation. We're getting a lot more money coming to us next year. And there's also a large undesignated spot still, what is it, 15%, 10%, 15% that can be spent on any of the categories. So I'm optimistic that we'll be in good shape. The wild card is that the city has a lot of capital needs in the buildings, and some of them are historic buildings, and I'm expecting they might sort of make a play on some of the historic preservation money to help out with City Hall or the old high school building or the fire station on Broadway or the parks and the old rec building and Walnut or fire station. So I don't know. There's a possibility that someone will try to swoop in and make a play on a lot of that money, but we'll see. And Roberta's hard at work updating our latest plans and things like that. One thing that was discussed today, which maybe you all have thoughts on, one of the things that happens if somebody, a non-government building or project gets historic preservation money, it's been our habit of requiring a preservation easement on their property as a condition for them. And this probably was around when you were in the commission too, Dick, was that thing?
Yes.
And so if they take a bunch of money to do their building, we obviously, it's the question that comes up is what kind of strings are attached to it? We can't just, here's $200,000 to do your building over, have a nice day, sell it as soon as you're done and you're suddenly a wealthy person. So we've had clawbacks in the case of the Adams Magoon House, where if they sell it within a certain time, then the city gets the money back or some portion of it. We've had the preservation easements, which are kind of a nice tool. It allows us to basically have it's sort of like a historic district in the house, but it can pertain to interior stuff as well. We're having some issues with that, however, legally where it's enforced who does the monitoring, because the easement holder is the city, Madison and Sarah and people like that. And it's practically speaking, we don't have the resources to do that monitoring. So there's some question about how effective is it to put a preservation easement on a building when the city doesn't really have the wherewithal to go out there and inspect it on a yearly basis and see if they did this or all that. So Roberta has asked for, or suggested that we get a consultants together to kind of hash out some of these details about how the city would best put forth restrictions on money that goes to people, either by preservation deed restrictions or preservation easements or other stuff. And this came up as an issue with the old police station on Bow Street. They wanted money to do repointing on the front of the building. And because it's a big collection of condominiums, we had an impossible time getting any kind of a preservation easement or other requirements that they pay back money if the units are sold, because it was so convoluted. They have all these different people living in the same building. In the end, it just didn't go forward because we couldn't come to an agreement with them. That was Mr. Coughlin's building. So that sort of put this whole subject in the front burner. So that's the only like little question mark there about what's going on as it pertains to historic preservation stuff. There's a chance that we'll be coming back to you all with some of those findings if we end up hiring somebody to work on this with us. Any questions? All right. Sounds like we're about done then.
We just actually note, it's not a question, Eric, but that you noted for the Adams Magoon House, that they got money subject to a clawback provision.
Yes.
Which I am pleased about. When I was on the CPC, they were asking for money and we were offering it subject to a clawback, and they were reluctant to take it because they didn't want to be subject to a clawback, which I was not pleased about, because the result then would be that they wouldn't get the money that they needed to preserve an important house. And we had a legitimate interest in a clawback if they sold it early, but if they didn't sell it, we had an interest in having them get the money and do the work on the house. So I'm really pleased to hear that they decided to do that.
Actually, I think that one is still in a little bit of limbo,
Okay.
believe it or not.
Okay.
To be a little
Okay,
wet
well,
blanket, but
hopefully they will get there. and
yeah,
it'll be finalized, because it's a very important house and they need money to preserve it. And we have money for just that purpose. And hopefully the details of the clawback will get ironed out.
yeah. So as you can imagine, that's why the place on Bow Street was much more complicated, because we had all these condo owners and their mortgagers wouldn't necessarily agree to it. And it got really messy. So we're trying to think of other ways to just have it daylighted or not be in perpetuity, or not perpetuity, but it just couldn't get anywhere. And it is an interesting discussion also with a house of such importance like Adams Magoon, where we would spend that money on a city building without thinking about it, of something of that importance, like something. And is it all that appropriate that we really clobber them with a 100-year clobber, something really long like that? Or maybe it's in such benefit to the city that they took the money, and if it gets sold to somebody else, then great, we have a house that got fixed up the right way instead of badly. So yeah, it's a little bit tricky. So that's why Roberta thought that it's best if we have someone who's experienced with these kind of matters. We can hire them as a
Yes,
consultant
I
and
think that's
kind
a good idea. It does seem like there must be people who thought a lot more about this and may have some answers for us.
yeah. Cool. Well, I think we're all wrapped up then.
Thank you then, Eric, for that report and for all of the
Sure.
work that you're doing.
My pleasure. Anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Okay, Mr. Shagnon, seconded by Mr. Bauer. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye,
aye.
Opposed? Ms. Price,
yes.
Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Shagnon,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. So we are adjourned. I'll
Thank
see
you
you
very
all in about a month, right? Because we don't have a first meeting in July. It's just the
Yep.
second.
Yeah, we don't have a meeting until the 3rd week of July, so it'll be a while.
Okay.
When you don't see an agenda sent out for July, the week of July 4th, don't freak out.
Right.
All right.
The meeting then is what is it? It's gonna be the
15th, okay.
15th? Okay.
Let me see. That
Yeah.
sounds right.
Just
Yep,
making sure I'm
the
not,
15th.
I'm away the following week, but not yet at that point, so.
Okay. And hopefully we'll have Robin back with us,
Ah,
but
yeah.
we'll see.
All right.
Nice.
It's also nice to have Dick here, so thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, thank you for being so flexible about attending, Dick.
Oh, glad it worked.
we do
Um,
not then have a second meeting the 5th Tuesday of July, right?
no.
No, we only ever have meetings the
First and third.
1st and 3rd.
That's what I thought, but. Okay. Wonderful.
All right. Well, good night, you all.
Take care, y'all.
Good
Good
night.
night. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Good night.
Night.